go ahead. So 17 by 1924, Saturn was squaring the sun. Saturn squared the sun 24. That's when he took an extended trip to North America, studied Pueblo Indians, and that was an adjustment of his goals, adjustment into a lot of cultural rituals and things. Then it built up to his midheaven in 1926. So Saturn was on his midheaven in 1926. In 1926, that was during the time from 20 to 26, was 2029 was his relationship to Richard Wilhelm. And by 2026 to 20, it was really a little bit late. It was a little bit later than that, 2029. But within a couple of years of that, Wilhelm gave Freud his copy of the Secret Teachings, the Secret of the Golden Flower, which is the book on Chinese alchemy. And that was a profound influence that began to affect the rest of his work for the rest of his life. He already had the sense of synchronicity, the mystical side, but this was it. He began at that point. That was a seed moment, but it came from being in a position he wrote the introduction to Carl Jung's to Richard Wilhelm's book on the I Ching and talked about the synchronicity, which is how he developed the idea. He'd been working with the I Ching for some time, but the Saturn was up there. So that was the beginning of the idea of alchemy. So he's in top position, but he's starting to work more. So he gets in position, but he has this other side that's working deeper and looking for more profound things, getting fascinated with the alchemy, which stayed the rest of his life. But from that position, so from, let's see, when did it close down? It closed down at, it hit the ascendant in 1932. So when the Saturn came down and hit the ascendant and opposed the sun. First time he got married, just before that. 32, what happened this time? 32, he worked as a professor of psychology at Federal Polytechnical University in Zurich, and became the editor for the Central Journal for Psychotherapy. Okay, so that was a big start. Now I haven't really filled in the history much longer because I really wanted to work on the time period of when Saturn went around. But from there, he went through the next phase of long ago, but it wasn't until 41 it hit the IC, 47, and by 56 it was up in his midheaven, and he died in 61 before it has ascended again. Okay, so he had a very prominent career and things built up going through that. I'm holding because I'm really looking at the time period of from 1900 to about 1915, in that period where Saturn's below his horizon, goes over his IC, hits his descendant. You know, when he gets married, when he had the relationship with Freud, and when it started, when it ended. I want to look at those times. So, seeing that, okay, so we're doing this for 1912 for when they split up. So 1912, Saturn would be in the growth and capacity quadrant. He would, or really, it was actually just past his IC. So he knows what he didn't want, Saturn on the IC, and it's spreading out. So the Saturn on the IC was pivotal in his ending of his relationship with Freud. But it was something that hit his depth. It's like, it's 10 years of personal growth, studying with Freud, aligning with Freud, studying with him, being the student, which is a good thing to be in personal growth. You grow a lot during that, but he grew a lot with Freud. But he had a different viewpoint, he had a different side. So one of the unique things about Jung with his sun in the seventh house, he could make other people feel they're important. And with his moon in Taurus, he could charm it. And once there was a good thing there, a good relationship there, a good connection, he's going to be fixed on it. He's going to lock into it. He's not going to go away from it. So his wife being his girlfriend being so well off and wanting to marry him, and so he locked in there, and he had in, he married, it was his birthday, he was taken care of there. With Freud, he got into the beginnings of psychotherapy and things, and it built up. He learned so much about it, but he had his own take on it. So those are two relationships where he created a codependency. One didn't break, one did break. Okay, and it's questionable if they both shouldn't have broken. So, okay, we're just going to go up to the 8-year graph here. And in the 8-year graph, it's a little after he met, I mean, he met Freud in, first meeting was in 2007, or 1907, excuse me, 1907, first meeting with Freud. And right then he began working with Freud. So it started. So this is going back to starts at 1909. And already you can see Neptune was squaring there's no Pluto aspects during this whole time. There's no confrontation about Pluto aspects. Pluto was steady. But Neptune, you can see in 1909, Neptune was squaring the Mercury, which means it was squaring Mercury through 1908 and probably the end of 1907. So as he met Freud and became a student and began working with him, there was already a Neptune-Mercury factor going in of questionable thinking, of something confusing against his ideas or questions. So he's going in being the student, but he's thinking differently. He had a Neptune complex. You could call it a dishonesty and evasiveness, a complex, just a puzzle, but it would have had a strong effect. So he's built up expectations, mental expectations, and he followed and he learned. He would suck it all up, but it wasn't. Freud would see it as exclusive relationship. Jung would see it not as exclusive. It's a relationship, and I'm getting this, but there's other things going on. Then by 1909, this is the time they started traveling. They went to the States. They started late in 1909. That's when he gave up work at the Bulgosi Institute and started this private psychoanalyst party. This all happened. So the Neptune Mercury he was believing is going just along with Freud, but eventually he started his own practice just as Neptune finishes with the Mercury. And the double standard between him and Freud, it's changed. The Neptune went over his Venus, had the vision of what he wanted, a dream of what he wanted. Wow. So I want to set up my own practice. So he does. He sets up with Neptune with great expectations. But during the same time, he's going traveling with Freud to America. And Freud was the main tag. Freud was the person going to present his material, and Jung was going along and lecturing as well. So Jung rode on his thing and got a lot of glory from being with Freud, and really was establishing his teachings there at the same time. So there was a contrary thing, but there was a high emulation. Like it was a good thing with, like he was getting popular and being appreciated. But as he was getting popular and appreciated, there was already the confusion set in motion between him and Freud that had been set in motion. There was a confusion going on there. Anyways, the trip was there. It was glamorous. It created a vision and opening for something he really wanted. It opened a dream with the Neptune to the Venus. The vision. Then it calmed down. 1910, 11, last 7, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. No Neptune. No more confusion around that. He had to have the vision of what he wanted. It wasn't until 1915 when Neptune conjuncted his sun and opposed his ascendant in 1916. So Neptune, that's to the sun, that's like your vision quest, another big dream, but it's opposing his ascendant. So what did he have here? He publishes the structure of the unconscious, but really he was drafted as the commandant of the internment camp during the 14 and 15. And I'm not sure how he managed to get out of that duty before the end of the war, but somehow he did, apparently. And in this last part, it was not part of that. So there was some parts of the story you don't understand. But this period, in this, I was looking at mostly just from his working with Freud, his beliefs, and his building up his teachings and his understanding. But you can see the Venus, Neptune, the Neptune on his Venus. I see it, I want it, I can see it so clearly. He has his visions of the collective unconscious, of synchronicity. He's seeing so many things at that time, and he went with it. And he was traveling and getting support and appreciation from people he was lecturing to as he was sidelining his back-to-back with Freud. But Freud was thinking we're both going together working on the same thing. But I think Jung managed to get a bit more of the glamour out of some of the traveling. Okay, now, but they did a lot of adventures together and did a lot of things together. So they got off in the American culture and the freedom of it and traveling and taking trips and going places. And I even saw a picture of them walking on the railroads together for a while. They did some little stint where they walked along the railroads, railroad tracks. So there's puzzles, lots of experiences, not just, there's a story other than just the academic story, but the academic story is a main theme of the belief systems going on. So even though the beliefs opened up there, by the time it hit the sun, they would have really opened up after, in 1516, just after his time in the running the internment camp. It was not a German internment camp. It was a Swiss internment camp. And this is in the teens, so it's the World War I. It was not the extreme Nazi type thing, and those extreme things at the time. It was more a question of in those concentration camps, people were being taken from cities and put in camps, and I don't know whether women were being fertilized or sterilized or what was happening, but there was certain anyways, there was a lot of scandal later on around this, but still coming out of that, Neptune hit his Venus. So he had a vision of, after being upset around, confused about what he was doing, his identity. He also started getting visions of a new purpose or a new way. Certainly, the idea of collective consciousness burning on his soul would be strong with that Neptune on the Sun. 1516. Yeah, and in 1970, at the end of this, he's writing during this time. At the end of this, in 1917, he publishes 7 Sermons to the Dead. That was his book being published at that time. And it was the first time he used the word archetyped. It was Instinct und Unbewusstes, I think. I don't know. I'm not sure. Forget my German. Okay. So this has a double thing. But we're looking at the Neptune. So we see puzzles there, confusing things. Now we look at Uranus, and we see by 1909, even though the confusion has been going on with it, there's been a heartbreak, a rejection, a hurt. Uranus opposing his Venus, his emotions not being appreciated. He wasn't being liked for his teachings with Freud. They were going on the trip together, but they're being together as friends, but their beliefs, and what he was not being accepted. His beliefs weren't being accepted, or his values of Venus were being shaken up and not accepted. He was realizing it was further away from Freud as it was. So that's a shake-up, a shock. So in 1909, when he started the lecturing and he gave up the work, the old job, to be able to go travel. So he gave up the old job to start to go traveling with Freud. But it was not, you can see, it was not, there were shocks and disruptions. Some new wave of understanding was coming in. So he was starting to get more mystical, more visionary, more aware of collective unconsciousness of deeper things, but he was being shaken and put down for it. So Uranus was Venus, like a divorce, right? It's a shock. So out of that shock, they still kept going, and they did some traveling. They were being together, and as things were going back and forth. But the situation started to sour after that, even though they don't see it with Uranus. The shock came. That's a big one. Then it passed that. By the time Uranus get into 1912, Uranus opposed his Sun and conjunct his ascendant 3 times over the year. This was the year where he finally said, that's it. He makes his final break with Freud. I'm doing my own thing. I'm not there. I don't belong there. He's leaving. Why put up with the negative codependent relationship? A codependent relationship where you're being expected to be different than you are, or have different values than you are. Like, how long do you play the game? So it broke with the Uranus opposing the Sun and conjuncting the ascendant.